The parade ground fell silent in a way that only catastrophe can achieve. 1,200 boots stood frozen in perfect formation, 1,200 pairs of eyes locked on a scene that would shatter careers. Rewrite regulations and become legend whispered in barracks for decades to come. At the center of it all, Admiral Randolph Corbett lay unconscious on the ceremonial dirt. His dress white stained with Virginia clay, his hat rolling slowly toward the color guard like a severed crown. Captain Ilara Brennick stood over him, hands clasped behind her back, spine straight as a rifle barrel. Her right knuckles throbbed. Her left cheek burned where his palm had cracked across her views 30 seconds earlier. But her voice, when it came, carried across that stunned silence with the clarity of a final radio transmission. "I will accept the consequences." No one moved. No one breathed. History had just fractured and every witness knew it. But this moment, this precise convergence of honor and violence had been building for 21 years. It started 4,200 miles away in a city that would teach an 11-year-old girl what sacrifice truly meant. Fallujah, Iraq, November 2004. The television glowed blue in the darkened living room. Ilara sat cross-legged on the carpet, homework forgotten, watching footage of Marines moving through devastated streets. Dust hung in the air like fog. Gunfire crackled. Her mother stood in the kitchen doorway, dish towel twisted in her hands, face pale as bone. The doorbell rang at 1900 hours exactly. Ilara would remember that precision forever. The military didn't do coincidence. Doorbells at 7 p.m. meant one thing. 2 Marines stood on the porch in dress blues. The older one, a captain with gray at his temples, held a folded flag against his chest. The younger gripped a manila envelope like it might dissolve in his hands. Neither man looked at Ilara. They focused on her mother with the terrible compassion of messengers who had delivered this news before, who would deliver it again. "Mrs. Brennick, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, has entrusted me to express his deep regret." The words blurred together. Official phrases: honorable service, combat operations, hostile action. The flag passed from the captain's hands to her mother's. 13 folds, 50 stars, the physical weight of a life compressed into cotton and symbolism. Ilara's mother collapsed into a chair. The younger Marine reached out, steadied her. The captain knelt eye level with Ilara, and his voice dropped to something almost gentle. "Your father was the finest Marine I ever served with. He saved his whole convoy, took position on a rooftop, held off enemy fire for 40 minutes while his brothers got to safety. He never broke, never ran. You understand what that means?" Ilara nodded, though she didn't. "Not really. Not yet. He asked me to tell you something if anything ever happened." The captain's jaw worked. He said, "Tell Ilara, hold steady, breathe, squeeze." Said you'd understand. She did understand that. 3 words. The fundamentals her father had taught her during their weekend trips to the range back when she was 8, and the rifle was almost as tall as her body. Shooting wasn't about strength. It was about control, patience, breath discipline. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze. The captain stood, rendered a salute so sharp it could have drawn blood, and walked back into the November night. The door closed. The house filled with the sound of her mother's weeping. Ilara walked upstairs to her room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of her bed. The Purple Heart ceremony would come later. The burial at Arlington with full honors. The 21-gun salute that would echo off headstones like the world ending in intervals. But in that moment, alone in the darkness, 11-year-old Ilara Brennick made a promise to a ghost 4,000 miles away. She would finish what he started. She would never cry again. Marine Corps Base, Quantico, Virginia. Present day. 21 years later. Ilara Brennick kept promises. The rifle lay across her cleaning mat in perfect geometry, disassembled down to springs and firing pins. An M40A5 sniper system, 42 inches of precision engineering, weight 16.5 pounds with scope, effective range 1,000 meters. Maximum range in the right hands under the right conditions with the right breathing and the cold mathematics of ballistics aligned like prayer considerably farther. Alara's hands moved through the cleaning ritual with the unconscious grace of 10,000 repetitions. Carbon scraper along the bolt face, bore snake through the barrel smooth and patient. CLP oil applied in exact measures. Each component inspected, judged, approved. The Schmidt and Bender scope got special attention. Glass this pure demanded respect. Around her the armory buzzed with the controlled chaos of a scout sniper platoon preparing for inspection. Younger Marines cleaned their weapons with varying degrees of competence. A corporal struggled with a stuck ejector pin. A lance corporal reassembled his rifle upside down. Didn't notice yet. Alara watched them peripherally, cataloging mistakes, planning corrections. Leadership meant catching failures before they became casualties. Captain Brennick. She glanced up. Lieutenant Grayson Aldridge stood at attention, dress uniform, immaculate expression, carefully neutral. 26 years old, Annapolis graduate, 3 years in the fleet, and still young enough to believe regulations mattered more than results. He'd learn. At ease, Lieutenant. What do you need? Aldridge shifted weight, uncomfortable. Bad sign. Ma'am, you've been requested for special assignment. Ceremonial detail. Medal of Honor ceremony 3 days from now at Norfolk. Alara's hands stilled on the rifle. Ceremonial duty. I run a scout sniper platoon, Aldridge. We don't do parade drills. Yes, ma'am. The request came from Admiral Corbett's office specifically. He asked for you by name. The name hit like a punch to the solar plexus. Alara kept her face blank, but her pulse spiked. Admiral Randolph Corbett, Surface Warfare Commander, 30 years of service, Navy Cross recipient, and the man who had ended her sniper career 2 years ago with a stroke of a pen and a pack of lies. Did the Admiral provide justification for this request? Aldridge's jaw tightened. He knew the history. Everyone in the chain of command knew. No, ma'am. Just said he needed experienced leadership for the color guard, high-profile event, press coverage. Alara returned her attention to the rifle, threading the barrel back into the receiver with absolute precision. Click. Seated. Locked. Tell the Admiral's office I'll be honored to serve. Ma'am. Aldridge hesitated, unusual for him. Sergeant Major Graves asked me to relay a message. He said, and I quote, "This smells like an ambush, and ambushes only work if you walk into them blind. Tell Graves I appreciate his concern. Tell him I'm walking in with both eyes open." She lifted the completed rifle, sighted down the barrel toward the far wall, checking alignment. Perfect, like always. Dismissed, Lieutenant. Aldridge saluted, turned on his heel, walked away. The armory door closed with a metallic clang that echoed longer than it should have. Alara set down the rifle and opened her footlocker. Beneath folded uniforms and field manuals sat a small wooden box, scarred and water-stained. She lifted the lid. Inside, resting on faded velvet, lay her father's Purple Heart. The bronze profile of George Washington caught the fluorescent light. The ribbon's purple and white edges had dulled with age. Beside it, wrapped in cloth, sat his dog tags. Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick, USMC, blood type O positive, Protestant. The medal still bore scratches from 21 years of combat training life, compressed into stamped steel. She lifted the tags, let them dangle. The chain was too short for her neck now. She wore her own tags, but sometimes late at night when the barracks fell silent, she held these and remembered a man who taught her to shoot straight, speak truth, and never surrender ground that mattered. Hold steady. Breathe, squeeze. You taught me well, Dad, she whispered to the empty armory. Let's see if it's enough. The senior enlisted quarters sat at the far end of base where the trees grew thick and the buildings carried the weight of decades. Sergeant Major Dalton Ironside Graves lived in a small apartment that smelled of gun oil, coffee, and old leather. He'd turned 67 last month. Retirement loomed like a storm front, but you didn't survive Desert Storm Somalia. And 3 decades of Marine Corps politics without developing instincts that bordered on supernatural. Those instincts were screaming now. Alara knocked twice, entered at his gruff come. She found him at his kitchen table surrounded by printouts and photographs. His reading glasses sat crooked on his weathered face, gray stubble covered his jaw. He looked up, gestured at the chair across from him. "Coffee. Please." He poured from a pot that had been burning since 0500. The coffee tasted like battery acid and determination. "Perfect." Alara sipped, waited. Graves didn't waste words. "You know why Corbett wants you at Norfolk?" "Not a question." "Because I saw him meeting with defense contractors in Afghanistan. Because I filed a report. Because he buried me for it." Graves tapped one of the photographs. It showed a younger Corbett, maybe 40 years old, standing on the deck of a warship. Smoke rose in the background. His uniform was scorched face, streaked with soot eyes, fierce with the kind of intensity that came from staring down death and spitting in its face. USS Princeton, February 1991. Iraqi Exocet missile punched through the hull, flooded 3 compartments. Corbett was damage control officer, manually sealed the bulkhead while water rose to his chest. Saved 40 sailors. They gave him the Navy Cross. "I know the story," Alara said quietly. "Read about it when I was 12, wanted to be like him." "Yeah." Graves pulled another photo from the pile. Older Corbett, grayer, harder, standing beside a young officer in marine dress blues. The family resemblance was unmistakable. "That's his son, Captain Sterling Corbett. Died in 2009. Training accident at Quantico. Female sniper trainee misidentified a target on a live fire range, sent a round through Sterling's chest instead of the practice target downrange. Kid bled out before the medevac arrived." Alara's stomach went cold. "I didn't know that." "Not many do. Corbett buried it deep, but something broke in him after that. Started seeing enemy action everywhere women served in combat roles. Filed complaints, blocked promotions, made life hell for every female officer who crossed his path." Graves leaned back, studied her. 2 years ago, you were his intelligence officer in Afghanistan. Top marks, commendations, slated for promotion. Then you witnessed something you shouldn't have. He was meeting with contractors from Titan Defense Systems. Late at night, off the books. I was running route analysis for next day's patrol, saw them through the command tent flap. They handed him an envelope. Thick. He didn't report it through channels. "And you filed a report through proper channels like a good Marine." "Yes, Sergeant Major." "And 3 weeks later you were transferred stateside, your sniper specialty reclassified, your promotion packet disappeared into administrative hell." Alara set down her coffee cup, stared at the table. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "You were. That's why you're dangerous." Graves gathered the photographs, slid them back into a folder. "I served with your father in Mogadishu 93. Black Hawk down. Things went sideways fast. We were pinned down, ammunition running low, insurgents closing in. Thaddeus took position on a rooftop with an M14, started picking them off. 1 shot, 1 kill, bought us time to extract. He saved my life and 12 others." He stood, walked to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of bourbon that probably cost more than a month's pay. Poured 2 fingers into 2 glasses, handed one to Alara. "Your father told me something that day," said Graves. "The hardest thing about being a Marine isn't the fighting. It's knowing when to fight, even when every regulation and every superior officer is telling you to stand down." He lived that code, died for it in Fallujah. Graves raised his glass. "You got his blood, his instincts, his stubborn refusal to run from a fight, so I'm going to tell you what I see coming." "I'm listening." "Corbett didn't request you for ceremonial duty because he needs a good Marine. He requested you because he wants to destroy you. Publicly, permanently. This Medal of Honor ceremony is high profile. Press coverage. Senior leadership attendance. He's going to do something that ends your career in front of witnesses, and there won't be a damn thing you can do about it without looking insubordinate." Alara drank the bourbon. It burned clean and righteous. "So what do you recommend? Refuse the assignment. Claim medical issue. Family emergency. Anything. Run. Survive." She set down the empty glass, met his eyes. "My father didn't run from a rooftop in Fallujah when he could have. I won't run from a parade ground in Norfolk." Graves studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Something like pride flickered across his weathered face. "Yeah, that's what I figured you'd say, just like Thaddeus." He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a small notebook, scribbled something, tore out the page. "This is the private number for a JAG officer. Colonel named Patterson. Good man. If things go sideways, you call him immediately. Don't wait. Don't try to handle it yourself." Alara took the number, folded it carefully, slipped it into her pocket. "Thank you, Sergeant Major." "Don't thank me yet. Just promise me one thing." "Sir, whatever happens out there, you remember who you are. You're Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick's daughter. You're a Marine Scout sniper with 47 confirmed kills and a combat record that would make most men weep. You've earned every inch of ground you stand on." His voice dropped, went rough. "Don't let some broken-down admiral with an axe to grind take that from you." "I won't." "Good." He walked her to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. "One more thing. That one 847-yard shot you made in Helmand Province. The one that took out the Taliban commander and saved that army convoy." Alara's pulse kicked up. She'd never discussed that shot outside of classified debriefs. "How do you know about that?" "Because I still have friends in high places, and because that shot is the best piece of long-range marksmanship I've seen in 40 years of service. The ballistics alone were insane. Wind elevation, target movement, no spotter backup." He smiled cold and sharp. "Corbett knows about it too. Read your classified file. That's what really scares him. Not that you're a woman, that you're better than any man under his command ever was." The door closed. Alara stood in the hallway processing. The 847-yard shot. She'd tried to forget it, but her body remembered. The way her heart had slowed to nothing. The way time had compressed. The way the crosshairs had settled on a moving target through heat, shimmer, and dust and pure calculated faith. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze. She'd killed a man from over a mile away with one bullet and saved 11 American lives. If Corbett wanted to destroy her for being competent, let him try. The next 48 hours blurred together in a controlled rush of preparation. Uniform inspections, manual of arms drills with M1 Garand ceremonial rifles, wood and steel from another war, another generation, polished until they gleamed like promises. The weight felt different from her M40A5. Heavier, less familiar. But the fundamentals remained. Balance, breathing, precision. Lieutenant Aldridge ran the platoon through synchronized movements until every step landed in unison, every rifle movement cut the air at identical angles. The younger Marines struggled with the archaic 8-count drill. Too many years with modern weapons, modular systems, practical warfare. Ceremony felt foreign to them. Alara walked the ranks, making corrections. A lance corporal's grip too tight on the barrel. A corporal's shoulder angle off by 3 degrees. Small failures that would compound into visible sloppiness. She adjusted grips, straightened spines, reminded them that ceremony wasn't about nostalgia. It was about proving that discipline ran deeper than convenience. "Why do we use these old rifles, ma'am?" The question came from a 19-year-old private whose name tape read Morrison. He looked genuinely curious, not disrespectful. Alara lifted her own M1. Garand felt its weight settle into her hands. "Because the men who carried these into Normandy, Iwo Jima, the frozen chosen, they bled for ground we take for granted. Using their weapons in ceremony honors that sacrifice. It says we remember. We carry what they carried, even if just symbolically." She met his eyes. "You understand, Private?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now fix your thumb position before you give yourself Garand thumb when that bolt slams home." Morrison adjusted his grip quickly, wisely. The drills continued, hour after hour. The Marines grew sharper, their movements synchronized. The rifles became extensions of their bodies. By the second evening, they looked like something their grandfathers would recognize. Warriors who understood that performance mattered, that eyes were watching, that history judged the living by how well they honored the dead. Alara called halt at 1900 hours, dismissed them to evening chow. Aldridge lingered, rifle still at port arms, sweat darkening his collar despite the cool Virginia evening. "Ma'am, can I speak freely?" "Always, Lieutenant. The men are talking. Rumors about why Admiral Corbett specifically requested you. About your time in Afghanistan, about—" He hesitated. "About him having it out for you." Alara began disassembling her Garand, methodical and calm. "And what do you think, Lieutenant Aldridge? I think you're the best officer I've ever served under. I think you know more about tactical operations, marksmanship, and leadership than most people learn in 20 years. I think if Admiral Corbett has a problem with you, it says more about him than it does about you." He paused. "But I also think he's a flag officer with enormous power, and you're a captain with a target on your back. Accurate assessment." She set down the rifle components, gave him her full attention. "So what would you do if you were me?" Aldridge considered that carefully. He wasn't stupid, just young. "I'd be smart, politically careful. Keep my head down, execute the mission flawlessly, and give him no ammunition." Spoken like an officer who wants to make major. She didn't mean it cruelly. "But sometimes, Lieutenant, the mission isn't about safety. It's about standing your ground when everyone is telling you to retreat. My father taught me that, died proving it. I won't dishonor his memory by running from a bully with stiz on his collar. Even if it costs you your career, especially then." She smiled, thin and cold. "Dismissed, Lieutenant. Get some rest. Big day coming." He saluted, left. The armory fell quiet. Alara finished cleaning the Garand, reassembled it, racked it with the others. Then she pulled out her personal weapon, the M40A5 that had been her constant companion through 3 deployments, 47 confirmed kills, and 1 impossible shot that had changed everything. She didn't clean it. It was already perfect. She just held it, felt its weight, remembered. Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2018. The heat rose in waves that bent light and made distances lie. Alara lay prone in a depression of rock and sand, ghillie suit blending her into the landscape. Rifle rested on a low bipod scope dialed to maximum magnification. 1,700 meters downrange through a gap in the ridgeline, she could see the village. Mud brick buildings, narrow streets, and somewhere in that maze a man responsible for 14 American deaths. Her spotter, Corporal Hastings, lay beside her, calling wind and distance through cracked lips. They'd been in position for 36 hours. No water left. Food gone. Radio check-ins every 4 hours to confirm they were still breathing. Then the call came through. Convoy moving through the valley 3 clicks north. Ambush likely. Taliban commander confirmed in the village, planning to trigger the attack personally. High-value target. Clearance to engage. Range 1, 847 yards. Hastings muttered, consulting his data. Wind 8 miles per hour variable. Temperature 94 degrees. Barometric pressure 29.8. Target elevation 60 feet above your position, and shit, he's moving. The Taliban commander appeared in the scope. White robes, dark beard, AK-47 slung over his shoulder, walking between buildings with the casual confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. At this distance, he was the size of Alara's thumbnail. "You can't make this shot," Hastings whispered. Not doubt, just mathematics. Cold bore, no warm-up, moving target distance outside any training parameters. The variables are too unstable. Call the wind. Alara, call it. Hastings swallowed hard, put his eye back to the spotting scope. Wind 8 miles per hour, 11 o'clock. Steady. Target moving left to right, approximately 2 miles per hour walking speed. You'll need to lead him by 3.5 miles minimum, maybe 4. Alara's world contracted to breath and mathematics. Distance 1, 847 yards. Wind value 2.1 miles right. Elevation 6.3 miles up. Target movement requiring a lead of 3.7 miles. Barometric pressure slightly low, reducing bullet velocity, adding maybe 0.2 miles to elevation. Temperature high, expanding air, increasing bullet drop. Coriolis effect at this latitude, minimal but real. She dialed the scope. Click, click, click. Each adjustment a prayer in metal. The Taliban commander stopped walking, turned, faced her direction, though he couldn't possibly see her. He pulled out a radio, started speaking. "Convoy ambush imminent. 3 minutes, maybe less. 11 American lives in the balance." Elara settled the crosshairs. The commander's chest filled the reticle. She shifted slightly, leading his position by 3.5 mils, trusting instinct and math in equal measure. "Hold steady." Her pulse slowed. 50 beats per minute. 45. 40. Breathe. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. Hold. The rifle rose and fell with her chest like they were one organism breathing together. Squeeze. The trigger broke clean. The rifle recoiled. The sound cracked across the desert like judgment. 3.2 seconds of flight time. Elara watched through the scope, perfectly still as the bullet traced an arc invisible to the naked eye, climbing, falling, drifting in the wind. Mathematical and inevitable. The Taliban commander's chest exploded in red mist. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. "Holy shit," Hastings breathed. "Holy shit. Confirm kill. Target down. Convoys calling in ambush aborted. They're asking who made the shot." Elara's voice came out steady, professional, empty of emotion. "Ghost 6 actual. Confirm 1 hostile KIA. Threat neutralized. Convoy is clear to proceed." "Copy that, Ghost 6. That's 47 confirmed. Outstanding work." She lay there for another hour, watching through the scope as insurgents found the body, panicked, scattered. The convoy rolled through the valley unmolested. 11 Americans went home alive that night. Later, after exfil, after debrief, after her hands stopped shaking from adrenaline crash, the battalion commander pulled her aside. "That shot will never go in any public record," he said quietly. "Too sensitive, too classified. But I want you to know I've been in this business 30 years. I've seen the best snipers in the world. What you did today was impossible. Mathematically, physically, by every training standard we have, impossible." "Yes, sir." "So how did you make it?" Elara thought about her father on a rooftop in Fallujah, holding ground against impossible odds, about promises made to ghosts, about the difference between what regulations said and what honor demanded. "I held steady, sir. I breathed. I squeezed." The commander nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud." Maybe. But Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick was 17 years dead, sleeping under Arlington marble beyond pride or disappointment, or anything except the silence that followed heroism. Elara never spoke about the shot again, until Admiral Corbett read her classified file and decided to weaponize it against her. Norfolk Naval Station, the morning of. Elara arrived at 0500 hours, 3 hours before ceremony start time. The parade ground stretched empty in the pre-dawn darkness, spotlights casting long shadows across manicured grass. Bleachers rose in tiers along one side. A stage stood at the far end, draped in red, white, and blue bunting. Cameras already positioned. This was going to be broadcast, recorded, immortalized. She walked the perimeter, checking sight lines, exits, potential problems. Old habits from tactical planning: know the ground, understand the terrain, identify where threats might emerge. Lieutenant Aldridge found her near the color guard staging area, both of them too wired to sleep, too disciplined to show it. "Marines are assembling now, ma'am. Uniforms inspected, rifles checked. We're ready." "Good." She adjusted her own dress blues, made sure her ribbons sat perfectly aligned. Afghanistan Campaign Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal. Rows of fabric representing years of service, sacrifice, choices that had led inexorably to this moment. "Ma'am," Aldridge's voice dropped, "whatever happens today, I want you to know the platoon has your back." She met his eyes, saw the loyalty there, the fierce protectiveness of a young officer who still believed in honor and justice. God, she hoped the Corps didn't beat that out of him. "I know, Lieutenant. That means more than you realize." Troops began arriving. 1,200 Marines in dress blues moving into formation with the practiced efficiency of trained warriors. The color guard took position, 8 Marines carrying flags that represented everything they'd sworn to defend. Elara joined them, rifle at port arms, spine straight, eyes forward. The sun climbed. The bleachers filled. Families, veterans, retired officers wearing their old uniforms, chests heavy with medals from forgotten wars. At precisely 07:45 hours, a black sedan arrived and the guest of honor emerged. 95 years old, thin as wire, back bent but eyes fierce. His suit hung loose on a frame that had once stormed beaches and climbed volcanic ash under machine gun fire. The Medal of Honor rested against his chest, that pale blue ribbon and bronze star that represented the absolute pinnacle of American military valor. Corporal Matthias Kane, Iwo Jima, 1945. He'd charged a Japanese bunker alone, thrown in grenades, cleared the position with a rifle and bayonet, and held it against counterattack for 4 hours while his platoon regrouped. 75 years later, his hands still trembled. The ceremony would honor him, recognize his sacrifice, remind a new generation what their grandfathers had endured. Alara felt something twist in her chest. This should be sacred, pure, a moment outside politics and personal grudges. At 0800 hours precisely, Admiral Randolph Corbett stepped onto the parade ground. He wore his dress white, summer uniform, gold braid on the shoulders, rows of ribbons dominated by the distinctive red, white, and blue of the Navy Cross. 61 years old, but he moved with the rigid intensity of someone who'd kept himself sharp through sheer force of will. Gray hair cropped tight, jaw like granite, eyes that scanned the assembled troops with predatory focus. Those eyes found Alara, held. Something cold and satisfied flickered across his face. The ceremony began. National anthem, invocation, speeches about duty and sacrifice and the unbroken chain connecting today's warriors to the heroes of the past. Corporal Kane sat on the stage looking small and fragile and somehow immortal. Then Corbett took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, active duty personnel, veterans, honored guests, today we celebrate the extraordinary valor of Corporal Matthias Kane. But we also remind ourselves that the standards he exemplified must be maintained. His voice carried across the silent field. Excellence in combat requires more than just physical presence. It requires truth, integrity, the absolute certainty that those who wear this uniform have earned their place through genuine accomplishment, not inflated records or political correctness. Alara's pulse spiked. She kept her face blank, rifle steady, but her knuckles whitened on the barrel. Corbett continued. Recently, stories have surfaced about questionable combat achievements, claims of extraordinary marksmanship that strain credibility, records that upon closer examination appear fabricated to advance certain agendas. He stepped down from the stage, began walking along the ranks, inspecting, judging, moving with calculated deliberation toward the color guard, toward Alara. We owe it to heroes like Corporal Kane to maintain absolute standards, no compromises, no exceptions, no stolen valor masquerading as legitimate service. He stopped directly in front of her. 1,200 pairs of eyes watched. Cameras recorded. This was the moment. The ambush Graves had predicted. The public destruction of her career, her reputation, everything she'd bled for. Corbett's voice dropped to something just above a whisper meant only for her. Your father died for nothing in Fallujah. A grunt on a rooftop playing hero, just like my son died because women like you insisted on playing soldier. The words hit like bullets. But Alara had been trained for worse. She kept her eyes forward, face expressionless, breathing controlled. Hold steady. Corbett leaned closer. His breath smelled like coffee and rage. That 147-yard shot you claim to have made impossible. Fabricated. I'm recommending a formal investigation into your entire service record. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky to avoid prison for stolen... His hand moved, fast, open palm. The slap cracked across Alara's face like a rifle shot. The parade ground went silent, time fractured. Alara staggered half a step, the M1 Garand nearly slipping from her grip. Her cheek burned, her vision blurred. Somewhere in the shocked silence, someone gasped. Cameras kept recording. 1,200 witnesses stood frozen, not believing what they'd just seen. An admiral, striking a subordinate officer, in front of the world. Corbett straightened his uniform, satisfied. You're dismissed, Captain. Return to your quarters. You're relieved of... He raised his hand again. Fist this time, moving to strike. And something inside Alara Brennick, something compressed and controlled for 21 years, since an 11-year-old girl had watched two Marines deliver a folded flag, finally broke free. Not rage, not emotion, just the cold clarity her father had taught her. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze. She moved. The M1 Garand dropped to the ground, forgotten. Her left hand intercepted Corbett's incoming fist, redirected the force past her shoulder. Her right hand came up fast and precise muscle memory from 1,000 hours of combat training and delivered a single controlled strike to his jaw. The impact was clean, mathematical, perfect. Admiral Randolph Corbett's eyes rolled back. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the ceremonial grass like a fallen monument, dress whites against green, unconscious before he hit the ground. His hat rolled free, tumbling across the parade ground in the sudden silence. Alara stood over him, chest rising once with a deep breath, then settling. Her hands moved automatically to clasp behind her back, parade rest position. The instinctive default of a Marine under stress. She looked at the stage. At Corporal Kane, the 95-year-old Medal of Honor recipient, who watched her with eyes that had seen Iwo Jima and understood something about the difference between orders and honor. She looked at Lieutenant Aldridge, whose face showed shock and fear and something that might have been She looked at the 1,200 Marines who had just witnessed history fracture in real time. And she spoke clearly, calmly, her voice carrying across the field with the same precision she'd used to call a shot at 847 yards. I will accept the consequences. No one moved. No one spoke. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackled, and the silence that had lasted 21 years since a girl had stood in a dark bedroom and promised never to cry again finally broke. The first person to move was a Navy corpsman. He pushed through the frozen ranks medical bag already open, dropping to one knee beside Corbett's unconscious form. Pulse check, airway assessment, professional detachment in the face of catastrophe. His voice cut through the silence like a blade through skin. Breathing, pulse steady, concussion protocol, I need a stretcher. Two more corpsmen materialized with a litter. They rolled Corbett onto his back with practiced efficiency. Secured his neck, lifted him as one unit. His head lolled. A thin line of blood traced from the corner of his mouth down to his collar. The dress whites would stain. Alara watched them carry him away, her hands still locked behind her back, her face absolutely empty of expression. Lieutenant Aldridge appeared at her elbow, voice low and urgent. Ma'am, we need to move now, before nothing, Lieutenant. The voice came from behind them, hard and official. A full commander in service dress pushed through the crowd, two master-at-arms following. The MAAs had their hands near their sidearms, not quite touching, but ready. The commander's name tape read Wilcox. His face could have been carved from stone. Captain Brennick, you are hereby ordered to stand down and accompany these petty officers to the base JAG office for immediate questioning. Alara didn't resist, didn't argue. Yes, sir. Your sidearm and credentials. She wasn't carrying a sidearm, ceremonial duty, but she pulled her military ID from her breast pocket, handed it over with steady fingers. Wilcox took it like he was handling evidence at a crime scene, which Alara supposed he was. Petty Officer Rains, Petty Officer Takashi, escort Captain Brennick to Building 7. Direct route, no stops, no conversations. He turned back to Alara and something almost like regret flickered in his eyes. Captain, you are advised that anything you say from this moment forward may be used in court-martial proceedings. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Do you wish to invoke your right to remain silent? No, sir, I will cooperate fully with the investigation. Wilcox nodded once sharp. Take her. The two MAAs moved to flank her, not touching, not restraining, just present. The crowd parted as they walked, 1,200 Marines staring in stunned silence. Some faces showed shock. Others showed something harder to define, not quite approval, but not condemnation either. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement that they'd just witnessed something that would be whispered about in barracks and mess halls for the next 20 years. Alara kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, her breathing controlled. The parade ground fell away behind her. The ceremony interrupted and shattered, dissolved into chaos she could hear but not see. Officers shouting, families confused, press cameras swiveling to follow her retreating form like predators tracking wounded prey. The walk to Building 7 took 4 minutes. 4 minutes during which Alara's mind played the last 60 seconds on repeat, analyzing, cataloging, searching for the precise moment when choice became inevitable. The slap, the raised fist, the muscle memory that had moved faster than thought. Had she had a choice? Yes. She could have stood there and taken the second blow, endured it, filed a complaint later through proper channels, played the system, survived. But her father's voice echoed in her skull, words spoken a lifetime ago on a rifle range when she was 8 years old and learning to shoot. Alara, there's a difference between patience and cowardice. Patience is waiting for the right moment. Cowardice is refusing to act when the moment arrives. Don't ever confuse the two. The right moment had arrived. She'd acted. Now came the consequences. Building 7 was a nondescript concrete structure that housed the base legal offices. The MAAs walked her inside, down a corridor that smelled like old coffee and anxiety, into a small room with white walls, a metal table, 3 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. The red recording light blinked steadily. "Wait here, ma'am," Petty Officer Rains said. "Young kid, maybe 23, trying to sound professional and mostly succeeding. Someone will be with you shortly." The door closed, locked from outside with a heavy mechanical click. Alara sat in one of the chairs, placed her hands flat on the table, and waited. The room had no windows, no clock. Time became elastic, meaningless. She focused on her breathing. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. The same rhythm she used before a long-range shot. The same discipline that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. The door opened after what might have been 20 minutes or an hour. A woman entered, late 40s, Colonel's Eagles on her collar, JAG insignia on her lapel. She carried a leather folder and moved with the controlled precision of someone who'd spent decades navigating military bureaucracy. Her name tape read Morrison. She sat down across from Alara, opened the folder, and studied its contents for a long moment before speaking. "Captain Brennick, I'm Colonel Sarah Morrison, Base Staff Judge Advocate. I'm here to advise you of your rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice and to conduct a preliminary inquiry into the events that occurred approximately—" She checked her watch, 73 minutes ago at the Medal of Honor ceremony. She pulled out a small recorder, set it on the table. "This interview is being recorded both by that device and by the camera in the corner. Do you consent to this recording?" "Yes, ma'am." "State your name, rank, and serial number for the record." "Captain Alara Brennick, United States Marine Corps, service number 5847392. Morrison made a note. "You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to have counsel present during questioning. You have the right to request that this interview be terminated at any time. Do you understand these rights?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you wish to invoke any of these rights at this time?" "No, ma'am." Morrison leaned back, studying Alara with eyes that had probably seen every variation of human behavior the military could produce. "Then let's start with a simple question. Did you strike Admiral Randolph Corbett?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you describe the circumstances that led to that action?" Alara kept her voice level, factual, empty of emotion. She recounted the ceremony, Corbett's speech about questionable combat records, his approach to the color guard, the whispered accusation about her father, the slap, the moment of decision when his fist rose for a second strike. Morrison listened without interruption, taking notes in neat handwriting. When Alara finished, the colonel set down her pen and folded her hands on the table. "You claim self-defense?" "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Corbett struck me once, then raised his hand to strike again. I responded with minimum necessary force to neutralize the immediate threat." "Minimum necessary force. That's your assessment?" "Yes, ma'am." Captain Brennick, you rendered a flag officer unconscious with a single blow in front of 1,200 witnesses, multiple cameras, and distinguished guests, including a Medal of Honor recipient. The optics here are catastrophic. Do you understand that? Yes, ma'am. And yet you're claiming self-defense against a 61-year-old admiral who, regardless of his actions, holds significantly less combat training than a Marine Scout sniper with 3 combat deployments. Alara met Morrison's eyes directly. Ma'am, the Uniform Code of Military Justice does not grant flag officers the right to physically assault subordinates regardless of rank disparity. Article 128 defines assault as unlawful physical contact. Admiral Corbett committed assault when he struck me. He attempted to commit assault a second time. I defended myself. My training is irrelevant to the legality of my response. Something flickered in Morrison's expression. Not quite approval, maybe respect. She made another note, spoken like someone who's read the UCMJ carefully. My father taught me that regulations exist to protect everyone, ma'am, not just those with power. Morrison nodded slowly. Tell me about your father. The question hit sideways, unexpected. Alara hesitated, then decided honesty served better than deflection. Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick, killed in action Fallujah, November 2004. He held a rooftop position against enemy fire for 40 minutes to allow his convoy to escape. He was a Marine's Marine, taught me to shoot to think, to never compromise on what mattered. And what matters to you, Captain? Honor, truth, protecting those who can't protect themselves. She paused, not allowing powerful men to destroy people simply because they can. Morrison closed her folder, leaned forward. Captain Brennick, I'm going to be direct with you. This situation is complicated in ways you probably don't fully appreciate yet. Admiral Corbett is a decorated officer with 30 years of service and significant political connections. You're a mid-grade captain with a stellar combat record but limited institutional support. The easy path for this command is to crucify you, make an example, and move on. I understand, ma'am. I don't think you do. Morrison's voice dropped, became almost confidential. What you don't know is that Admiral Corbett has been on our radar for some time. Complaints, allegations, nothing concrete enough to pursue but patterns. Your case isn't occurring in a vacuum. There are people, senior people, who want to know the truth about Randolph Corbett. What happened today might have just given them the opening they needed. Alara's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. What are you saying, ma'am? I'm saying cooperate fully, tell the truth, don't embellish but don't minimize, and trust that the investigation will be thorough. Morrison stood, gathered her materials. You're going to be confined to bachelor officer quarters pending the completion of preliminary inquiries. No communication with anyone outside the legal process without clearance. No social media, no press statements. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Good. An escort will take you to your assigned quarters. Expect to be interviewed again, possibly multiple times. Expect this to get worse before it gets better. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, Captain, I've read your service record. The real one, not whatever sanitized version Corbett tried to circulate. What you did in Helmand Province was extraordinary. Don't let anyone make you forget that. The door closed. Alara sat alone for another 20 minutes before different MAAs arrived to escort her to confinement. The BOQ room was small and sterile. Bed, desk, chair, window with blinds drawn. They left her uniform but took her phone, her laptop, anything that could connect to the outside world. The door locked from outside. She was alone with her thoughts and the weight of what she'd done. Alara sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel. Her hand throbbed where it had connected with Corbett's jaw. Her cheek burned where he'd slapped her. But deeper than physical pain was something harder to name. Not regret, not quite fear. A kind of free-fall sensation, like stepping off a cliff and not knowing if there was ground below or just empty air forever. For the first time in 21 years, she cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears that tracked down her face and dropped onto her folded hands. She cried for her father, who died on a rooftop believing his daughter would have a better military than the one he'd served. She cried for the 11-year-old girl who'd made a promise she might not be able to keep. She cried because she was tired and scared and alone in a way that combat had never made her feel. Then she wiped her eyes, straightened her spine, and began planning. Whatever came next, she would face it the way Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick had taught her. With discipline, with honor, with absolute refusal to surrender ground that mattered. She pulled out the scrap of paper Sergeant Major Graves had given her, the JAG officer's number. She couldn't call no phone, but she memorized it anyway, repeating the digits until they locked into her memory like coordinates for a target. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze. The night passed slowly. Alara didn't sleep. She ran through the incident 1,000 times, examining every angle, every decision point. By dawn, she'd reached a conclusion. She wouldn't change anything. Given the same circumstances, she'd make the same choice. That certainty brought a kind of peace, fragile but real. At 0600 hours, a key turned in the lock. A different MAA, older, with the weathered face of someone who'd seen everything twice. He carried a breakfast tray, eggs, toast, coffee, and set it on the desk without comment. "Ma'am, you have a visitor. Legal counsel. You've got 30 minutes. Alara's heart jumped. "I didn't request counsel." "Counsel requested you. You can refuse, but I'd recommend against it." "Who is it?" "Major Garrett Thorne, JAG Corps. That's all I know, ma'am." The MAA left. Alara barely touched the food. Her stomach felt like it was filled with broken glass. 15 minutes later, the door opened again. The man who entered was maybe 45, graying at the temples with the kind of lean build that came from running every morning regardless of weather. Family legacy. He carried a briefcase and moved with the controlled intensity of someone who didn't waste energy on unnecessary motion. His eyes swept the room, cataloging exits, camera positions, potential threats. Combat awareness. This wasn't a lawyer who'd spent his career behind a desk. "Captain Brennick." He extended his hand. His grip was firm, brief, professional. "Major Garrett Thorne, JAG Corps. I've been assigned as your defense counsel for the court-martial proceedings." Court-martial. The word hit like a fist. "It's already proceeding to court-martial. Preliminary Article 32 hearing scheduled for 72 hours from now. Formal charges will be announced later today." He set down his briefcase, pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've reviewed the initial reports. The situation is serious, Captain. You're facing potential charges under Article 128, assault on a superior commissioned officer. Maximum penalty includes dismissal from service, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and confinement." Alara's mouth went dry. "How long?" 10 years. The number hung in the air like smoke. 10 years. For defending herself against an assault. For refusing to be a victim, for one moment of controlled violence that lasted maybe 3 seconds. Thorne must have read her expression because his voice softened slightly. "That's maximum penalty. Unlikely given the circumstances. But we need to prepare for the worst while working toward the best outcome. So I need you to tell me everything, and I mean everything. No editing, no protecting anyone, the truth start to finish." Alara told him. From the beginning, her father's death, her career, Afghanistan, the contractor meetings she'd witnessed. Corbett's retaliation and forced transfer. The leaked story about her 847-yard shot. The ceremony, the slap, the knockout. Thorne listened, taking notes in shorthand, occasionally asking clarifying questions. His face revealed nothing. When she finished, he sat back and steepled his fingers. "Okay, here's what we're dealing with. The prosecution will argue that regardless of Corbett's initial assault, your response was disproportionate. A trained combatant striking an older, less physically capable officer. They'll paint you as a hot-headed warrior who lost control and assaulted a superior officer in front of witnesses. The optics are bad. And our defense. Self-defense. Article 128 allows for defensive force to prevent imminent bodily harm. Corbett struck you once, then raised his hand to strike again. You responded with the minimum force necessary to neutralize the immediate threat. One strike, controlled, then immediate surrender to authority." He paused. "The problem is proving immediate threat. A good prosecutor will argue that a 61-year-old admiral doesn't pose legitimate threat to a 32-year-old combat veteran. He outranks me by 5 grades. He has institutional power I don't possess. Physical capability isn't the only form of threat. True, but not legally relevant under Article 128. We need to focus on the physical assault and immediate danger. Thorne flipped through his notes. What we have in our favor is witnesses, 1,200 of them, and cameras. If the footage shows what you say, it shows 2 attempted strikes, defensive response, immediate surrender. We have a case. Have you seen the footage? Not yet. It's being reviewed by the investigative team. But I've put in a formal request for all video evidence, audio recordings, and witness statements. He leaned forward. Captain, I need to ask you something directly. Did you want to hit Admiral Corbett? Was there any part of you that saw an opportunity for revenge and took it? Alara met his eyes. No, sir. I wanted to complete my duty, honor Corporal Kane, and go home. Admiral Corbett forced my hand. I responded to an immediate threat, that's all. Thorne studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you. Now we need to make a jury believe you. That's going to be harder. He spent the next hour walking her through the Article 32 hearing process, how it worked, what to expect, what she could and couldn't say. He gave her homework, write down every detail she could remember, every witness who might support her version of events, every piece of evidence that might corroborate her story. One more thing, Thorne said as he packed up his briefcase. Sergeant Major Dalton Graves has been trying to contact you. He can't, obviously, given your confinement status. But he wanted me to pass along a message. What message? He said, tell her Thaddeus would be proud. Tell her to hold the line and tell her I'm working angles she doesn't know about yet. Thorne smiled slightly. I don't know what that means, but Graves seems like the kind of Marine who gets things done. He is? Good. You're going to need people like him. Thorne headed for the door, paused with his hand on the knob. Captain Brennick, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've defended a lot of Marines in a lot of situations, some guilty, some innocent, some complicated. You strike me as someone who made a hard choice in an impossible moment. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that choice doesn't destroy your career, but I need you to trust me and trust the process. I do, sir. Then get some rest. This is going to get much worse before it gets better. The door closed, locked. Alara returned to the bed, pulled out the legal pad Thorne had left, and began writing. Names, dates, details, everything she could remember about the ceremony, about Corbett, about the 2 years of harassment that had led to this moment. The words poured out like a confession, or a battle plan, maybe both. Outside her window, the sun climbed higher. Somewhere on this base, investigators were interviewing witnesses, reviewing footage, building cases both for and against her. The machinery of military justice ground forward, impersonal and inevitable. Alara wrote until her hand cramped, then kept writing, because this was what she could control, the truth, her version of it, the story that needed to be told even if no one believed it. At 1300 hours, the MAA brought lunch. At 1800 hours, dinner. Neither meal was touched. Alara wrote through them both, filling page after page with precise details, reconstructing the event from multiple angles, anticipating questions, building her defense. One word at a time. Night fell. The room grew dark. She kept writing by the light of the single desk lamp, refusing to stop, refusing to rest, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant fear, and fear meant weakness. At 2200 hours, the door opened without warning. Colonel Morrison entered, followed by 2 people Alara didn't recognize. A commander with intelligence insignia on his uniform, a civilian woman in a dark suit carrying a tablet. Morrison's expression was unreadable. Captain Brennick, we need to talk. New evidence has emerged, evidence that changes everything. Alara set down her pen, straightened in her chair. What kind of evidence, ma'am? Morrison gestured to the commander, who pulled out his own tablet and queued up a video file. Body camera footage from Lieutenant Aldridge. He was standing approximately 15 feet from you when the incident occurred. His camera captured the entire exchange, audio and visual, Crystal clear. He turned the tablet toward Alara and pressed play. The footage showed the parade ground from Aldridge's perspective. Corbett approaching the color guard, the speech about stolen valor, the approach to Alara's position, then crucially the whispered words that were barely audible on the recording but clear enough to transcribe. Your father died for nothing in Fallujah, a grunt on a rooftop playing hero, just like my son died because women like you insisted on playing soldier. The slap, the crack of palm on cheek, Alara's controlled reaction, a half step back, then straightening, holding formation. No retaliation, perfect discipline. Then Corbett's voice, again louder now. You're dismissed, Captain. You're relieved of... His hand rising, fist closed, clear intent to strike a second time. Alara's defensive movement, the intercepted fist, the controlled counter-strike, Corbett dropping, Alara immediately stepping back, hands behind her back. I will accept the consequences. The video ended. Silence filled the small room. Morrison spoke carefully. This footage definitively establishes 2 attempted assaults by Admiral Corbett. It establishes that you did not initiate violence. It establishes that your response was controlled and proportionate. From a legal standpoint, Captain, this is as close to perfect self-defense documentation as I've ever seen. Alara's heart hammered. So the charges are still proceeding, because striking a flag officer regardless of circumstances requires formal review, but the evidence significantly strengthens your case. Morrison paused. However, that's not why we're here at 2200 hours. Show her the rest, Commander. The intelligence officer queued up a different file. This one was audio only. Timestamp showed it was recorded approximately 6 months ago. Afghanistan, Forward Operating Base Lighthouse. Voices emerged from the tablet's speaker. One she recognized immediately as Corbett's. The others were unfamiliar but clearly civilian. Need confirmation on the contract extension. Our board is getting nervous about the timeline. Corbett's voice weary and irritated. I've already told you. The body armor contract will be approved. My signature carries weight, but I expect compensation for expediting this through channels. Of course, Admiral. The payment structure we discussed remains in place. 4.2 million across 3 accounts. Make it 5, and I want guarantees that if any issues arise with the equipment, my name stays out of it. Understood. Our company takes full responsibility for product performance. A bitter laugh from Corbett. Product performance. That's what you call armor that fails ballistics testing. 17 Marines have died wearing your defective vests in the last 8 months. I read the reports. Market conditions require certain cost compromises, Admiral. Our shareholders. I don't care about your shareholders. Just make sure my deposit's clear on schedule. The recording ended. Alara felt like she'd been punched in the gut. He knew. He knew the armor was killing Marines, and he approved the contract anyway. Worse, the civilian woman said. Her voice was crisp, professional, and absolutely cold. I'm Special Agent Andrea Castellano, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. We've been building a case against Admiral Corbett for 14 months. Financial fraud, acceptance of bribes, conspiracy to defraud the government. This recording was obtained through a confidential informant embedded in Titan defense systems. It's been authenticated and verified. Combined with financial records we've subpoenaed, it's enough to prosecute. Morrison took over. Captain Brennick, the reason we're telling you this is because your incident with Admiral Corbett has accelerated our timeline. The media attention, the public scrutiny, it's forced our hand. We're going to arrest Corbett tomorrow morning. Formal charges under UCMJ Articles 92, 133 and multiple federal statutes. This becomes public in approximately 12 hours. And my court-martial proceeds separately. The law doesn't care about Corbett's other crimes when evaluating your actions. But politically, practically, the context matters. A decorated admiral who struck a subordinate officer while under investigation for corruption, the narrative shifts dramatically. Agent Castellano leaned forward. Captain, I need to ask you some questions about what you witnessed in Afghanistan. The contractor meetings, any conversations you overheard, financial transactions, anything that might support our case against Corbett. Alara's mind raced. This was the vindication she'd hoped for 2 years ago when she'd filed her initial report. Proof that Corbett was corrupt, that her instincts had been right, that the retaliation against her career had been about covering crimes, not about gender or politics or any of the lies he'd spread, but it also meant becoming a witness, testimony, depositions. Her career even more entangled with Corbett's downfall. "I'll tell you everything I know," she said quietly. "But I need to understand something first. Those 17 Marines who died in defective armor. Do their families know? Do they know their sons and daughters died because an admiral took bribes?" Morrison and Castellano exchanged glances. Castellano answered, "Not yet, but they will. We're working with casualty assistance to prepare notifications. This is going to destroy families, Captain. Reopen wounds. Some of those Marines died in operations you were part of." The weight of that settled over Alara like a physical force. Faces flashed through her memory. Corporal Hastings, her spotter in Helmand. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from her first deployment. Young Marines who'd trusted their equipment, trusted their leaders, and died because of corruption. "Then we owe them the truth," Alara said. "All of it, no matter what it costs." "Agreed." Castellano pulled out a digital recorder. "Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything you remember about Admiral Corbett's activities in Afghanistan." They talked for 3 hours. Alara recounted every detail. The late-night meetings, the contractors she'd seen entering and leaving Corbett's command tent, the envelope that had changed hands, the sudden shift in Corbett's attitude toward her after she'd filed her report, the transfer orders that had come through with suspicious speed. Castellano recorded everything, asked clarifying questions, cross-referenced details with evidence she'd already compiled. By the time they finished, it was past Dora 100 hours. Alara felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Morrison stood, gathered materials. "Captain Brennick, get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be chaotic. Admiral Corbett's arrest will be all over the news. Your name will be part of that story. There will be pressure, media requests, people taking sides. I need you to stay silent. No statements, no interviews. Let your lawyer handle communication." "Yes, ma'am. One more thing." Morrison's voice softened fractionally. "What you did today, striking a flag officer, was a violation of regulations. But what you did 2 years ago, reporting corruption despite knowing it would end your career, that was the kind of courage we claim to value but rarely actually reward. For what it's worth, I think the Marine Corps is better with you in it than without you." The door closed, locked. Alara sat in the sudden silence, processing everything. Corbett's arrest, the corruption investigation, the dead Marines, the body camera footage, self-defense evidence, witness testimony, the machinery of justice grinding forward in ways she couldn't predict or control. She returned to the window, lifted the blinds slightly. Outside the base slept. Streetlights cast pools of yellow illumination. A patrol walked past MPs on their routine rounds. Everything looked normal, orderly, but beneath that surface calm, everything had changed. Somewhere in a hospital bed, Admiral Randolph Corbett was waking up to his last hours of freedom. Tomorrow he'd be arrested. His career, his legacy, his carefully constructed reputation, all of it would burn. Not because Alara had punched him, but because he'd sold his honor for $5 million in 17 coffins draped in American flags. Alara pulled out the legal pad again, turned to a fresh page. She wrote a single line at the top, words her father had once told her during a training exercise that had gone wrong when she'd been 15 and thought she'd ruined everything. "The truth doesn't care about your timeline. It arrives when it arrives. Be ready." She'd been ready for 21 years. Ever since 2 Marines in dress blues had handed her mother a folded flu and disappeared into the Virginia night. Tomorrow the silence would end. Not with her fist, but with the 1,000 voices that had witnessed truth colliding with power. With investigators who'd worked in shadows for months. With families who deserved to know why their children hadn't come home. Alara set down the pen, lay back on the narrow bed, and closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 days, sleep came easily. Not peaceful, but inevitable. Outside, dawn approached with the patient certainty of Judgment Day. The arrest happened at 0630 hours. Alara didn't see it, but she heard about it from Major Thorne when he arrived at her BOQ room 90 minutes later. His expression carried the grim satisfaction of a lawyer who'd just watched the opposition's case collapse in real time. Corbett was taken into custody at Bethesda Naval Hospital. 4 NCIS agents, 2 Navy JAG officers, and enough media presence to make it a spectacle. Thorne set down his briefcase, pulled out his tablet. It's already all over the news. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Military Times has it as their lead story. Decorated Admiral arrested on corruption charges. Your name is in every article, Captain, as the officer who struck him, as the whistleblower who first reported his activities 2 years ago. You're famous. Alara's stomach churned. I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to do my job. Well, you're going to have to accept a certain amount of visibility now. The narrative has shifted. Yesterday you were a violent subordinate who assaulted a superior officer. Today you're the Marine who stood up to corruption and paid the price for it. He swiped through news articles on his tablet. Public opinion is swinging hard in your favor. There's a petition online calling for all charges against you to be dropped. It has 200,000 signatures and counting. Public opinion doesn't determine military justice. No, but it creates pressure, political pressure, the kind that makes generals nervous and politicians pay attention. Thorne closed the tablet, met her eyes. Captain, I'm going to be direct. The prosecution is in a very difficult position. They're still moving forward with your Article 32 hearing because regulations require it, but their case is evaporating. Body camera footage supports self-defense. Witness statements corroborate your version of events. And now Corbett is facing decades in prison for corruption that directly contradicts his credibility as a witness against you. So you think the charges will be dropped? I think the hearing will proceed, we'll present our evidence, and the investigating officer will recommend against court-martial. But nothing is guaranteed. Military justice has its own momentum. He paused. There's something else. We've received over 300 offers of character witness testimony. Marines you've served with, officers who've observed your leadership. Even Corporal Matthias Kane, the Medal of Honor recipient from the ceremony, submitted a written statement supporting you. That stopped Alara cold. Corporal Kane, he doesn't know me. He knows what he saw. An admiral striking a subordinate officer, a Marine defending herself with restraint and discipline. He wrote, and I quote, I stormed Iwo Jima with men who understood that rank without honor is tyranny. Captain Brennick defended her dignity the way a Marine should, with controlled force and immediate accountability. If that's a crime, then we've lost our way. Thorne smiled slightly. A 95-year-old Medal of Honor recipient calling you out as a model Marine. That carries weight, Captain. Alara felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, opening. She'd spent 3 days in isolation believing she was alone in this fight. But she wasn't. The core, the real core, the one made of people instead of regulations, was standing with her. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we prepare. The Article 32 hearing is tomorrow at 0900 hours. You'll testify. I'll present evidence. Witnesses will be called. It's not a trial, just an investigation to determine if charges are warranted. But it's crucial. This is where we make our case. He pulled out a thick folder. I need you to review these witness statements. Familiarize yourself with what others are saying. Be ready for cross-examination. They spent the next 4 hours in preparation. Thorne walked her through potential questions, aggressive tactics the prosecutor might use, ways to maintain composure under pressure. He was thorough, demanding, and completely professional. By the time he left at 1600 hours, Alara felt as prepared as she could be for what amounted to a public dissection of the worst moment of her life. That night, alone in the BOQ room, she pulled out her father's Purple Heart again. The metal felt heavier than it should, like it carried not just bronze and ribbon, but the weight of promises made and kept. She thought about Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick on that Fallujah rooftop, making the choice to hold ground when retreat was the smarter option, choosing honor over survival. I hope I'm doing this right, Dad, she whispered to the empty room. I hope you'd be proud. The medal offered no answers, but holding it brought a kind of peace anyway. Sleep came in fragments. When dawn arrived, Alara showered dressed in her service uniform with mechanical precision and waited for the escort that would take her to the hearing. The Article 32 hearing took place in a conference room that had been converted into a makeshift courtroom. Long tables faced each other, a raised desk at the front for the investigating officer, chairs along the walls for observers. The room was packed. Marines in uniform, civilian lawyers, a handful of media representatives who'd been granted access. Every eye tracked Alara as she entered and took her seat beside Major Thorne. The investigating officer was a colonel named Bryce Kellerman. Late 50s combat infantry background, reputation for being scrupulously fair and impossible to intimidate. He reviewed the case file for a moment, then looked up. This Article 32 hearing is convened to investigate charges against Captain Alara Brennick under Article 128 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, assault on a superior commissioned officer. Captain Brennick, you have been advised of your rights. Do you understand the nature of these proceedings? Yes, sir, Alara said, her voice steady. Major Thorne, you represent the accused. Yes, sir. Commander Walsh, you represent the government. The prosecutor stood, mid-40s JAG career officer wearing the tight expression of someone who knew his case was weak but had to proceed anyway. Yes, sir. Then let's begin. Commander Walsh, present your case. Walsh laid out the government's position with clinical efficiency. Captain Brennick struck Admiral Corbett, rendered him unconscious. Regardless of provocation, the action constituted assault on a superior officer. The physical disparity between a trained combatant and a 61-year-old admiral made the force used excessive. Court-martial was warranted to address this violation of military order and discipline. It was a competent argument, legally sound in a vacuum, but it ignored context, ignored evidence, ignored the reality of what had happened on that parade ground. Then Thorne stood. Sir, the defense does not dispute that Captain Brennick struck Admiral Corbett. What we dispute is the characterization of that action as assault rather than lawful self-defense. Article 128 explicitly allows for defensive force to prevent imminent bodily harm. We will demonstrate through video evidence, witness testimony, and Captain Brennick's own account that she faced 2 separate assault attempts by Admiral Corbett and responded with the minimum force necessary to neutralize an immediate threat. He clicked a remote. The large monitor at the front of the room flickered to life. The body camera footage played, every detail captured in high definition. Corbett's approach, the verbal assault, the whispered accusation, the first slap, the crack of impact making several observers wince. Alara's controlled reaction, no retaliation, perfect discipline. Then the crucial moment, Corbett raising his fist, clear intent, undeniable threat, Alara's defensive movement, intercepted strike, controlled counter, Corbett dropping, Alara immediately standing down. I will accept the consequences. The video ended. Silence filled the room. Thorne let it hang for a moment, then spoke. This footage documents 2 attempted assaults by a superior officer against a subordinate. It documents restraint and discipline from Captain Brennick. It documents a textbook example of proportionate defensive force. The government's case requires us to ignore what we can all clearly see. Colonel Kellerman leaned forward. Commander Walsh, response. Walsh stood clearly uncomfortable. Sir. While the video does show Admiral Corbett initiating contact, the question remains whether Captain Brennick faced genuine threat requiring physical response. A 61-year-old officer, regardless of his actions, poses limited physical danger to a combat-trained Marine. She could have absorbed the second strike and reported the assault through proper channels. She could have let him hit her again, Thorne said, his voice sharp with contained anger. That's what the government is arguing. That Captain Brennick should have stood there and allowed continued assault because her attacker held superior rank. That regulations somehow obligate victims to endure violence from their superiors. He turned to Kellerman. Sir, with respect, that's not justice. That's institutional endorsement of abuse. Major Thorne, I understand your point, but we must also consider military order and discipline. Then let's talk about order and discipline. Thorne gestured to the monitor. Admiral Corbett struck a subordinate officer during an official ceremony in front of 1,200 witnesses. He compromised good order and discipline the moment he raised his hand. Captain Brennick's response didn't create chaos. It responded to chaos Corbett initiated. Kellerman made notes. I want to hear from Captain Brennick directly. Captain, take the witness chair. Alara stood crossed to the chair beside Kellerman's desk and raised her right hand for the oath. Her voice came out steady. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Be seated. Kellerman studied her for a moment. Captain Brennick, in your own words, describe what happened during the Medal of Honor ceremony. Alara recounted the events. Not the sanitized version, the real one. Corbett's approach, the accusations about stolen valor, the whispered attack on her father's memory, the slap, the moment of decision when his fist rose for a second strike. I had 3 options, sir, she said quietly. I could stand there and take the hit. I could retreat and abandon my post, or I could defend myself with minimum necessary force. I chose defense. 1 strike, controlled, then immediate surrender to authority. I didn't pursue additional violence. I didn't retaliate beyond what was required to stop the immediate threat. You're a trained combatant. You knew 1 strike would be sufficient to incapacitate Admiral Corbett. Yes, sir. That's why I used only 1 strike. If I'd wanted to cause serious injury, I had the training and opportunity to do so. I chose the minimum force that would end the threat. Commander Walsh stood. Captain Brennick, isn't it true that you filed a complaint against Admiral Corbett 2 years ago? That you had a pre-existing conflict with him? Yes, sir. I witnessed what I believed to be inappropriate conduct with defense contractors. I reported it through proper channels. And Admiral Corbett subsequently transferred you and ended your sniper career? Yes, sir. So you had motivation for revenge. Alara met Walsh's eyes directly. Sir, if I wanted revenge, I would have taken it 2 years ago. Or last week. Or any of 1,000 opportunities in between. I didn't strike Admiral Corbett because of our history. I struck him because he was attacking me and showed clear intent to continue attacking me. My motivation was survival, not vengeance. Walsh pressed. But you must have felt satisfaction, vindication, finally getting back at the man who ruined your career. No, sir, I felt regret. Admiral Corbett was a hero once. He earned his Navy Cross through genuine courage. Watching him fall literally and metaphorically brought me no joy. It just made me sad for what he'd become. The answer seemed to deflate Walsh's momentum. He tried a few more questions, but they lacked conviction. Finally, Kellerman dismissed Alara back to her seat. I want to hear from witnesses, Kellerman said, starting with those present at the ceremony. For the next 2 hours, Marines testified. Lieutenant Aldridge described what he'd seen, his body camera footage corroborating every detail. Sergeant Major Graves spoke about Alara's character, her father's legacy, and the pattern of harassment from Corbett. Other Marines from the Color Guard confirmed the sequence of events. Then Colonel Morrison took the stand and dropped a bomb. Sir, I'm required to inform this hearing that Admiral Corbett is currently under arrest on separate charges, including conspiracy to defraud the government, acceptance of bribes, and violations of Article 92. These charges stem from a 14-month NCIS investigation into defense contractor corruption. Captain Brennick's initial report 2 years ago was the first indication of these activities. Her subsequent retaliation by Admiral Corbett is now understood as an attempt to silence a whistleblower. The room erupted in murmurs. Kellerman banged his hand on the desk. Order! Colonel Morrison, are you saying Admiral Corbett's actions toward Captain Brennick were motivated by her reporting his criminal activities? Yes, sir. That's the NCIS conclusion based on available evidence. Walsh stood quickly. Sir, Admiral Corbett's other legal troubles are irrelevant to the question of whether Captain Brennick committed assault. They're relevant to his credibility, Thorne countered. They're relevant to his motivation for attacking Captain Brennick. They're relevant to establishing a pattern of retaliation and abuse of power. Kellerman raised his hand. Both counsels make valid points. I'll note the information for my recommendation, but we'll focus on the specific incident at hand. He checked his notes. I have one final witness I'd like to hear from. Master Gunnery Sergeant Boone Thatcher, please take the stand. An older Marine stood from the observer section. Late 50s weathered face wearing the kind of ribbons that told stories of decades in the Corps. He settled into the witness chair with the calm of someone who'd testified before. State your name and position, Kellerman said. Master Gunnery Sergeant Boone Thatcher, Chief Instructor Scout Sniper School, Marine Corps Base Quantico. And you know Captain Brennick, how? I trained her, sir. She went through Scout Sniper School in 2016. Graduated top of her class. I've also reviewed her combat performance records from 3 deployments. And what's your professional assessment of Captain Brennick's capabilities? Thatcher didn't hesitate. She's the finest sniper I've trained in 22 years as an instructor, sir. Her technical skills are exceptional, but more importantly, her judgment and discipline under pressure are extraordinary. The 1847-yard shot she made in Helmand Province, which I understand Admiral Corbett publicly questioned, has been verified through drone footage, ballistics analysis, and enemy communications intercepts. It's one of the most difficult shots I've ever seen documented. Can you explain why that shot was so difficult? Distance, sir, over a mile. Moving target, no spotter backup. Heat shimmer affecting visibility. Wind variable. Cold bore meaning no warm-up shots to confirm 0. The mathematical calculations required are staggering. Most snipers wouldn't attempt that shot. Captain Brennick made it because she had the skill, the nerve, and the absolute discipline to control every variable within her power. Thatcher leaned forward slightly. Sir, I've spent my entire career teaching Marines when to shoot and when not to shoot. The same principles apply to hand-to-hand combat. Captain Brennick showed textbook judgment on that parade ground. She absorbed one strike without retaliation. She only responded when the threat continued, and she used precisely the amount of force required, no more. That's not assault. That's perfect discipline under extreme duress. The testimony landed like an artillery round. Even Walsh seemed to have no response. Kellerman dismissed Thatcher, reviewed his notes for a long moment, then spoke. I've heard sufficient testimony. This hearing is concluded. I will submit my recommendation to the convening authority within 72 hours. Captain Brennick, you are remanded to your current confinement status pending that decision. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel fell. The room emptied slowly. Elara sat with Thorne, processing. How do you think it went? She asked quietly. Better than I hoped. Kellerman is fair. He'll look at the evidence objectively. My guess, and it's only a guess, is he'll recommend against court-martial. But we wait and see. Thorne packed his briefcase. Go back to your quarters, rest. This isn't over yet, but we've presented the strongest case possible. The MAAs escorted her back to the BOQ. Elara spent the rest of the day in a strange limbo. Not quite free, not quite condemned, just waiting while others decided her fate. That night, lying in the narrow bed, she thought about the 17 Marines who'd died in defective body armor, about Corbett's corruption, about the weight of truth and the cost of speaking it. She'd started this journey at 11 years old, watching 2 Marines deliver a folded flag. 21 years later, she'd kept the promise she'd made that night. She would finish what her father started, whatever the price. The recommendation came through 72 hours later. Major Thorne delivered it personally, and his expression told Elara everything before he spoke. All charges dropped. Colonel Kellerman found clear evidence of self-defense and determined that court-martial was not warranted. The convening authority concurred. You're cleared, Captain. Elara closed her eyes, felt the weight lift. Just like that. Just like that. You'll be released from confinement within the hour. Your service record will reflect the incident, but also the finding of justified self-defense. You're free to return to duty. Return to duty where? Thorne smiled. That's the interesting part. You've been offered 3 options. Pentagon staff position, instructor role at Quantico, or command of 1st Marine Division Scout Sniper Platoon. The Pentagon offer was political. The Quantico role was safe. The Sniper Platoon was operational, combat-ready, real leadership. The platoon, Elara said without hesitation. That's where I belong. Thought you'd say that. Thorne extended his hand. It's been an honor, Captain. You fought this the right way, with truth and discipline. Your father would be proud. The handshake was firm, brief, professional. Then Thorne left, and Alara was alone with the reality of what came next. She gathered her few possessions, changed into fresh utilities, and walked out of the BOQ into Virginia sunshine. No ceremony, no announcement. Just a Marine returning to duty after a storm that had changed everything and nothing. Lieutenant Aldridge met her outside with the vehicle. Captain, good to see you, ma'am. Good to be seen, Lieutenant. Where are we headed? Quantico, the platoon is waiting. They drove in comfortable silence. Alara watched the landscape roll past familiar roads, familiar buildings, the rhythms of a military base continuing regardless of individual drama. Life went on, missions continued, the Corps endured. At the Scout Sniper compound, Marines worked through training exercises. Rifles cracked at the range. Instructors called corrections. Young warriors learned the ancient mathematics of wind and distance and breath control. Alara stepped out of the vehicle and the shooting stopped. Sergeant Major Graves stood near the range tower, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Then slowly, deliberately, he came to attention and rendered a salute so sharp it could have drawn blood. The entire platoon followed. 30 Marines snapping to attention, rendering honors to their returning commander. Alara returned the salute, voice carrying across the range. As you were. They relaxed, but the moment hung in the air. Recognition. Respect. The kind that couldn't be ordered or faked. Graves approached, extended his hand. Welcome home, Captain. Good to be home, Sergeant Major. Your father would have been proud. What you did, standing up to Corbett, speaking truth, taking the consequences, that's the kind of leadership the Corps needs. Alara glanced at the training Marines, then back to Graves. I didn't do anything special. I just didn't run when running would have been easier. That's exactly what makes it special. Graves gestured toward the range. We've got a new crop of Scout Sniper candidates. Young, eager, talented. They need someone to teach them that marksmanship isn't just about pulling triggers. It's about judgment, discipline, knowing when to shoot and when to hold fire. Think you're up for it? Alara smiled. I think I can manage. She spent the rest of that day on the range working with students, making corrections, sharing the knowledge that had been passed to her by instructors who'd learned it from instructors before them. An unbroken chain of expertise running back through wars and conflicts and quiet times of preparation. At 1700 hours, she secured her rifle, walked to her small office, and sat behind the desk that now belonged to her. The walls were bare except for a single photograph she'd brought from storage. Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick in Desert Utilities, squinting against Iraqi sun rifle slung over his shoulder, looking both young and ancient at once. Alara pulled out her father's Purple Heart, set it on the desk beside a framed copy of the Marine Corps values. Honor, courage, commitment, words that meant something only if you lived them when it cost. She opened her laptop, began drafting training schedules for the next week. There was work to do, Marines to train, standards to maintain. The mission continued because the mission always continued. A knock at the door. Lieutenant Aldridge stuck his head in. Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. Says he served with your father. Alara looked up, curious. Send him in. An older man entered, 70s, lean and weathered, wearing a VFW cap and a jacket covered in patches from units and conflicts. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body remembered war even if the mind tried to forget. Captain Brennick, I'm James Riley. I served with your father in Mogadishu 93. I was in the convoy he saved when we got pinned down. Haven't seen you since you were a kid at your dad's funeral. Alara stood, shook his hand. Mr. Riley, I remember. You spoke at the service. Did I hell that whole day was a blur? Riley shifted weight, suddenly uncertain. I came because I saw the news. What happened with the Admiral? And I thought you should know something about your father that maybe you didn't. Sir. The night before Thaddeus died, we were both on rooftop duty, talking to pass the time. I asked him what scared him most about being a parent. You were 11 then, just a kid. And he said the thing that scared him was that someday you'd face a choice between doing what was right and doing what was safe, and he wouldn't be there to tell you which to choose. Riley's voice roughened. I told him not to worry, that you'd figure it out, and he said, yeah, she will, because I'm teaching her now. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze. It's not just about shooting, James, it's about life. Stay calm, think, act with precision. That's how you survive and keep your honor intact. The words hit Alara like a physical force. All these years she'd thought her father's final message was about marksmanship, but it was about everything, every decision, every moment when the easy path diverged from the right one. Thank you for telling me that, she said quietly. Thought you should know. What you did standing up to that Admiral, that was your father's teaching in action. He'd be real proud, Captain. Riley saluted old school and crisp, then turned and walked out. Alara sat back down, stared at her father's photograph, felt tears track down her face for the second time in 21 years. But these weren't tears of grief. They were something else. Recognition, completion, the sense that a promise made long ago had finally been kept. She pulled out a sheet of paper, began writing. Not a report, not a legal document. Just a letter to a ghost who'd been gone 21 years but somehow remained more present than most living people. Dear Dad. The silence ended, not with my fist but with 1,200 voices who found courage to speak truth. You taught me that honor isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up and facing consequences with integrity. I stood, I fell, I got back up. 17 Marines died because Admiral Corbett valued money over lives. Their families will know the truth now. Justice is slow, but it's coming. You'd say that's what matters. I've been given command of the Scout Sniper Platoon. Same fundamentals you taught me at 8 years old. I'll pass them forward. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze, words that mean everything. I miss you, every day. But I'm not that 11-year-old girl anymore crying in a dark bedroom and swearing never to cry again. I'm a Marine. You're Marine. And I'm doing what you taught me to do. I'm finishing the mission. Semper Fi, Dad. Alara. She folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, wrote Estachit Thaddeus Brennick, USMC on the front. Tomorrow she'd take it to Arlington, tuck it against his headstone, let the words find him wherever Marines went when the final mission ended. Tonight she had work to do. Alara pulled up the training schedules, began making notes. Ballistics class needed updating. The wind reading curriculum required revision. She wanted to add a section on judgment under pressure, on knowing when discipline mattered more than aggression. Hours passed. The base grew quiet. Other offices went dark, but Alara kept working because this was what she did now, what she'd always done. The mission, the calling, the promise to dead men and living Marines that someone would maintain standards, pass forward knowledge. Remember why any of this mattered. At 2300 hours, she finally secured her computer, locked the office, and walked out into the Virginia night. The sky was clear, stars visible despite ambient light from the base. Somewhere up there, physics and mathematics governed trajectories just like they governed bullets. Predictable, reliable, true. She thought about the 847-yard shot in Helmand Province, the impossible calculation, the moving target, the moment when faith and science merged into a single trigger pull that saved 11 lives. She thought about the parade ground, the slap, the raised fist, the choice between enduring and defending. Different situations, same fundamentals. Hold steady under pressure, breathe through fear and rage, squeeze when the moment demands action. 3 weeks later, Alara stood on the Quantico rifle range teaching those principles to a class of new Scout Sniper candidates. Young Marines, male and female, eager and terrified in equal measure, learning that precision wasn't about strength. It was about control. Distance to target 1,200 yards, she called out. Wind 7 miles per hour, 10 o'clock. Temperature 68 degrees. Calculate your dope and make the shot. The students worked through the mathematics. Elevation adjustments, wind calls, breathing cycles, Some struggled, others excelled. Alara moved among them, making corrections, offering guidance, passing forward the wisdom that had been passed to her. A young female corporal raised her hand. "Ma'am, what if I miss? What if I do the math right and still miss?" Alara knelt beside her, adjusted the rifle position slightly. "Then you breathe. You recalculate, you try again. Missing isn't failure, Corporal. Refusing to shoot because you're afraid of missing, that's failure. You understand the difference?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now make the shot." The corporal settled behind her rifle. Breathing slowed, body relaxed, the fundamentals taking over. She squeezed the trigger. Downrange 1,200 yards away, the target pinged. Center mass. "Outstanding," Alara said quietly. "That's how it's done. Next shooter." The training continued through the afternoon. When the range finally secured at 1700 hours, Alara gathered the students for a final brief. "You're learning to be snipers, but more importantly, you're learning to be decision makers. Every shot you take has consequences. Every shot you don't take has consequences. Your job is to understand those consequences and act accordingly." She paused. "Some of you will face situations where the right choice isn't clear, where regulations and reality don't align. In those moments, remember your training. Hold steady. Breathe. Squeeze. Trust your fundamentals and accept the outcome." "Ura, ma'am," they called in unison. "Dismissed." The students dispersed. Alara secured her rifle, walked back toward the compound buildings, and found Sergeant Major Graves waiting by the armory. "Good session today, Captain. The kids are learning." "They're motivated. That helps." Graves pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This came for you. Official correspondence from Headquarters Marine Corps." Alara's stomach tightened. Official correspondence could mean anything. Awards, reprimands, new orders. She opened the envelope, carefully pulled out the single sheet of paper. It was a promotion order. Effective immediately, Captain Alara Brennick was promoted to Major United States Marine Corps. The order cited exceptional leadership under adverse conditions and commitment to the highest standards of honor and integrity. She stared at the paper, not quite believing it. After everything, the assault, the hearing, the media storm, they were promoting her. Graves smiled. "Congratulations, Major. Well deserved. I didn't ask for this. That's probably why you got it. The Corps needs leaders who care more about the mission than the rank." He extended his hand. "Your father would be proud. So am I." The handshake was firm, warm, carrying decades of shared understanding. Marines who knew what it meant to serve, to sacrifice, to keep going when everything said to stop. That evening, Alara drove to Arlington National Cemetery. The grounds were quiet, visitors sparse as dusk approached. She walked the familiar path to Section 60, where the recent fallen rested in perfect rows. Then further back to the older sections where warriors from Iraq and Afghanistan and earlier conflicts slept beneath white marble. She found her father's headstone easily. Had been here hundreds of times. The inscription was simple. Name, rank, dates of birth and death, the Marine Corps emblem. Words couldn't capture what he'd been, what he'd given, but they tried. Alara knelt, pulled the letter from her pocket, the one she'd written 3 weeks ago. She tucked it against the base of the headstone, held by a small stone to keep it from blowing away. "Mission accomplished, Dad," she whispered. "Admiral Corbett is facing court-martial. 17 families will get answers. The Corps is better because you taught me never to quit. I made Major today, not because I wanted it, because I earned it the same way you taught me to earn everything. Through discipline, through honor, through refusing to surrender ground that matters." She placed her hand flat against the cold marble, feeling the connection across death and time and all the distance that separated the living from the dead. "I'm training the next generation now. Teaching them what you taught me. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze, they'll pass it forward. Your legacy continues through me, through them, through every Marine who learns that courage isn't about fearlessness. It's about doing what's right when everything screams to run." The sun dropped below the horizon. Shadows lengthened. Somewhere in the distance, a bugler played taps, that haunting melody that honored the fallen and reminded the living that service continues beyond any individual life. Alara stood, rendered a final salute to her father's grave, and walked back toward her vehicle. Tomorrow there would be more training, more students, more moments to pass forward the wisdom of warriors who came before. The mission continued because the mission always continued. 6 months later, Major Alara Brennick's scout sniper platoon deployed to Syria, counter-ISIS operations, high-risk Overwatch missions protecting Army and Kurdish forces, the kind of work that demanded absolute precision and uncompromising discipline. On a rooftop in Raqqa, 900 yards from a convoy moving through hostile territory, Alara settled behind her M40A5 rifle and scanned for threats. The summer heat made distance measurements uncertain, wind variable, civilian presence complicating target identification. Through her scope, she spotted movement. A figure with an RPG preparing to engage the convoy. Clear threat, but positioned near a building with civilians visible through windows. The shot was technically possible, but the margin for error was razor thin. Her spotter, a corporal named Santos, called wind and distance. 900 yards, wind 6 miles per hour, 2 o'clock. Target stationary, civilians at risk if you miss. Alara calculated, breathed, remembered every lesson, every fundamental, every promise made to the living and the dead. "I have the shot," she said quietly. "Cleared hot. Hold steady." The rifle settled into her shoulder, became an extension of her body. Breathe, 4 counts in. Hold, 4 counts out. The world reduced to crosshairs and mathematics. Squeeze. The trigger broke clean. The rifle recoiled. The bullet flew true. 900 yards of arc and precision and faith in fundamentals that never lied. The target dropped. The RPG fell unfired. The convoy rolled past 11 American soldiers, continuing home alive. Because a Marine on a rooftop had done her job with absolute discipline. "Confirm," Santos said. "Target down, convoy clear." Alara didn't celebrate, didn't speak, just chambered another round, scanned for additional threats, and continued the mission. Because that's what Marines did. They held ground. They protected their brothers and sisters. They finished what they started. Later, in the relative safety of the forward operating base, she pulled out a small notebook and made an entry in her personal log. Not official, not for any report, just a record for herself. Syria deployment day 47. Successful Overwatch. Convoy protected. Target neutralized at 900 yards. Dad's fundamentals continue to work. Hold steady, breathe, squeeze. The mission continues always. She closed the notebook, secured it in her pack, and prepared for the next operation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new moments where discipline and training would mean the difference between life and death. But tonight, on a rooftop half a world away from that Virginia parade ground where everything had changed, Major Alara Brennick allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She'd kept her promises, honored her father's memory, stood her ground when power demanded surrender. The silence that had lasted 21 years had finally ended, not with rage or vengeance, but with truth spoken by 1,000 voices who'd found courage to stand witness. Justice was slow but inevitable. Honor demanded patience but rewarded persistence. And somewhere in Arlington, beneath white marble and American soil, Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brennick rested easy, knowing his daughter had learned the lessons well. Hold steady through the storm. Breathe through the fear. Squeeze when the moment demands action. 3 simple rules that governed everything from marksmanship to life itself. The mission continued. It always would, because that's what Marines did. They finished the fight. Semper Fidelis.